CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The Horn of Africa is once again suffering the effects of severe climate change, with the World Food Programme estimating that over 13 million people in the region will be affected by drought. Over the last year, the Horn has experienced 3 consecutive poor rain cycles, which have severely impacted crop and livestock production and water resources. However, this situation is nothing new, with the drought ravaging the region repeatedly over the last decade. Unpredictable weather patterns are now the norm, and coupled with the impact of COVID-19 and regional conflict, the situation is going from bad to worse. So what can be done to bring this cycle to an end? This week on the program, we explore some possible long-term solutions to this humanitarian disaster affecting the Horn of Africa. I'm Beatrice Marshall. Welcome to Talk Africa. Well, as the East African region reels from yet another cycle of extreme weather patterns, millions of people are faced with starvation. Before we begin our discussion today, my colleague Daniel Arap Moy brings us this report.
This is Mahada and her 9-month-old daughter Fatuma in Kenya's Wajir town. Little Fatuma is being tested for malnutrition. The family lost most of their livestock to drought and is now struggling to put food on the table. Across the border in Ethiopia's drought-stricken Adadle district, dust storms and dead cattle are a common scene. In Somalia's Kebele village, pastoralists are trying to save their emaciated cow. But with the severe drought, not much seems left to salvage.
We haven't had the last 2 rainy seasons. We never experienced this before. We only see dust storms now. We are afraid that they will cover us all and become our graveyard, like what happens in the desert.
Many people have been forced to flee their homes because of the drought.
The drought killed our livestock, so we had to leave our homes and come here.
What we're seeing at the moment is a dramatic increase in food insecurity, in undernutrition. Livestock are dying, and people are being forced from their homes because they have lost their livelihoods.
In Ethiopia, an estimated 5.7 million people affected by severe drought still need food assistance. In Kenya, the government declared the drought a national emergency in September 2021, leaving an estimated 2.8 million people in dire need of assistance. According to the World Food Programme, the number of acutely food insecure people in Somalia is expected to increase from 3.5 to 4.6 million between February and May 2022, unless humanitarian assistance is delivered.
Quite a number of initiatives are going on. I know the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, is also working to address the climate challenges within the Horn of Africa, because the affected countries, Kenya, Ethiopia, Somalia, are all part of IGAD.
As a continent, I think we needed to take more initiatives. But most importantly, we needed to engage the private sector. It's only the private sector that can sustain agriculture because they are driven by profit. So we needed to embrace the private sector in agriculture.
But fears are growing over a looming 4th failed rainfall season in the region between March and May that could worsen the drought and food insecurity crisis. The prolonged drought in the Horn of Africa has left no time for people to recover from one failed rainfall season to the next, causing pastoral and farming communities to lose their livestock and crops. Water has also become scarce, leaving thousands of people falling into the food security crisis. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN, Kajiado, Kenya.
Well, joining me now to unpack Africa's drought crisis are from the United States, Dr. Esther Ngumbi, Assistant Professor of Entomology at the University of Illinois. In Nairobi, Yusuf Ahmed, Regional Director for Islamic Relief, and Wanjiru Kamau, an agricultural policy specialist. Thank you all for joining me in this discussion, and welcome to Talk Africa. Yusuf, if I may start off with you, every few years the same devastating tragedy unfolds. Now in 2011, the Horn of Africa region experienced the worst crisis in 60 years. In 2022, we are hearing of another crisis unfolding as a result of drought. Give us an estimation of the scale and magnitude that we are witnessing today.
The unfortunate thing is that droughts have become really very cyclical and very frequent over the last couple of decades. And as you have alluded to, we had a major drought in 2011, and again we are currently having another one. And the explanations are actually quite not very complex. We have the climate change, which is basically driving the change in rainfall patterns, and the amount and the precipitation and the amount of rain that the areas that are currently being affected by the drought receive. The Horn of Africa, the southern part of Ethiopia, the whole of Somalia, and the north and northeastern parts of Kenya are currently actually the epicenter of the current drought, and largely because of failure of 3 consecutive rains. And this dates back to late 2020, when the seasonal rainfall was nearly missed, and the rainfall was not really enough to support the smallholder farmers and the pastoralists who largely rely on livestock as a means of livelihood. So according to the current estimates, we're talking about 20 million people who are again unfortunately requiring urgent humanitarian assistance.
Let me rope in Dr. Ngumbi here to get your perspective. Dr. Ngumbi, climate variations will continue to happen. So we know the course of what is going on at the moment. Why don't we have a grasp?
The NGOs know what is happening. The country governments know what is happening. It's been happening for every year repeatedly. So why are we not putting into place measures, short-term, long-term? We know that rains, as long as they are dependent on rain-fed agriculture, rains that are all tied on to the changing weather patterns to feed the livestock. I think it's just easy. There's something that is wrong. And if we did not get it in 2011, why are we not, as countries, sitting back to reflect and to see where is the problem? Is it from the grassroots? Is it a top-bottom problem? And then how do we put into place? First of all, we know that the northern people have to have their livestock. Why did we wait until this moment when their cows are dying? Couldn't we convert or sell the livestock previously and convert it into beef, into meat? That is the meat and export it. Why? I think there's a bigger problem.
Well, let me bring in Wanjiru at this point, because we are still talking about how many people, are having a crisis as a result of the drought since 2011. We hear there now about 20 million as a result of climate change. Is there a failure of a policy here? Where is the failure?
I think there isn't a failure in policy. There isn't a policy failure. My view is that we have very good policies. If we look at the policies we have at county level, at national level, and even at regional level at the Horn of Africa, I think the policy framework is very good. The problem with policy is the implementation. As with most African countries, we develop very good policy, but the implementation is a challenge. There's poor follow-up, and if we look at the way we address issues of drought, it's more of a reactive, a humanitarian way of addressing that challenge, rather than focusing on preventing preventing the drought, the drought developing into a crisis. So I think if we focus on preventative measures to ensure even where there is a drought, because they will be inevitable because of climate change until we manage the change in climate, there's going to be challenges with climate change, and therefore droughts are inevitable.
Dr. Ngume, this brings in a very interesting situation here. I mean, being rather humanitarian dependent, is that where we are? And that is why we are not breaking out of the cycle.
I think if we continue to say everything we're doing is correct, obviously we are not. Everything we're doing is not correct. And I think I like that you're bringing up, yes, we are dependent on donor money, but we know, as we've talked about insurance, in every donor dollar, why don't we take 50 cents and put it to build resilience? Why? Also, I'm hearing about top up and bottom up that are not working together. Yes, for example, in Kenya, we have the county government and we have the national government. How are we aligning these two governments that are working under separate control systems? Yes, we are over dependent on this donor money. And of course, we know we have corruption.
Right.
It will be wrong if we don't talk about corruption. We know that probably 3 billion or 30 billion, 10 billion of that ends up in somebody's pocket, not to the people. I like that the NGOs already know what is working. They have success stories. How can we make sure that governments and big UNWFP, for example, are now scaling up those projects that are working? I am a scientist now. We also know that it will also need drought-tolerant crops. We will also need to breed drought-tolerant or breeds of livestock that are able to consume the little amounts of food that's available and convert it into more nutritious food so that the cows are healthy. So I think that we need a lot of expertise, including the people that are affected. I believe that they have their own unique thoughts that needs to be captured.
Yusuf, your thoughts on that as a member of the NGO community?
It's not all about humanitarian emergency, to be honest. I think a lot has been really learned, over the years, and the, NGO community, including Islamic Relief, which I represent here, and the donors in this region, particularly in the Horn of Africa region, the 3 countries which are currently facing the drought, has put a lot of effort in terms of really resilience building, of course, together with, in collaboration with both national and subnational governments. And, the programs that I have just, talked about, which is actually finding, workable solutions in terms of really making sure that water is, available. And it's not only groundwater. In Somalia, for example, in the northern part of Somalia, we had to drill up to 450 meters. You can imagine some of the boreholes back in 2017-16, So we're looking at also other, durable solutions, like, harvesting the rainwater, using that water for both livestock, but also for small-scale, farm, crop production. The example I gave, from Moyale sub-county of Marsabit, that dam provides water is meant to provide water to around 20 acres of land.
Right.
And they are going to produce, and these are actually agro-pastoralists who were not farmers previously, but, this is one way to go about it, and livelihood diversification and helping them to actually produce for themselves, but also, what do you call it, sell the surplus, to the, nearby markets.
So, Wanjiru, I want to get your reaction to this, that it is not really just a matter of a humanitarian assistance, that the buck doesn't just stop with the non-governmental organizations. What are the wider issues here?
I think if we're focusing on issues of the humanitarian end, we need to build the resilience of communities, because we know that, and we have really good early warning systems. I remember even in the drought of 2011, there were already early warning systems out showing that there was a possible drought in 2011 by mid-2010. But what happened? There was delayed response. If you look at the issue of declaration of national disasters, they have to be declared by the head of state for, funding to kick in, money to be allocated for disasters to be managed. So if there's a delay in the declaration of the disaster, then as happens in most cases with drought, then you'll find a situation where it's leading to a lot of deaths and a lot of loss of livestock, things that could have been managed. So we need to move beyond the humanitarian, addressing the humanitarian crisis, to what can we do to prevent at the community level, at the policy level, at the county level, and also at national level.
All right, we're going to take a short break now. Very insightful discussion going on. But when we return, we'll discuss possible long-term solutions to the problem of drought in the Horn of Africa. Don't go away. Welcome back to Talk Africa. Still with me are Dr. Esther Ngumbi, Yusuf Ahmed, and Wanjiru Kamau. Before the break, we looked at the impact of the recurring drought in Africa. Let's now look at some possible long-term solutions. Dr. Ngumbi, we've heard that the solutions are obvious, that perhaps interventions come later on, after, not before. If we know that the solutions are obvious, why are we not implementing what we know?
First and foremost, I think there is a need to ensure we have permanent water sources. And if it's not permanent, we build micro dams, big dams, and actually make sure the entire country, Kenya is such a small country, for example, is having entire wall of water. I like the water, the green water, or the green wall throughout the entire country of Kenya. We know that. Secondly, I think we need to empower the communities and the people themselves. Okay, if you can't even get that big garden, how about small kitchen gardens? Let's ensure that each family has one or two, even if it's a sack. There's so many innovative small ways to grow food that they have that. Of course, they keep livestock. They have a small trough where they can have water for their livestock. Okay, at these communities, why don't we build centers where there's food pantries, or there are other ways to get food that they can get year in, year out? So it has, I think there will be multiple sources. Also, we must take care as we drill for water, not to also get into the problem of exhausting our water sources, because we know water is also a natural resource. It has its own limit. And secondly, how can we tap into the expertise that's already there, from bottom up through to the entire country? How can we come together to ensure that actually implementation? So I hear that it's not a matter of solutions that aren't there. It's a matter of implementation.
So let's revisit what has been done, because Yusuf, you've mentioned quite a number of projects that you've implemented, your organization has implemented in some of the worst hit drought areas in the Horn of Africa. Which ones are proving successful? Which ones are working? Which ones haven't proven successful?
Quite a number of successful stories from the projects that we do in the Horn of Africa region. As I said, water schemes, rainwater harvesting is really is a big success, and we've implemented those micro dams both in southern part of Ethiopia, southeastern part of Ethiopia, northeastern Kenya, Somalia, particularly the northern and northeastern part of northwestern part of Somalia, basically the areas called the Puntland and also Somaliland. Those are really working, very well. And water is not only for drinking, as I have said. It's actually in those pastoral areas, development or resilience can be built around making water available for those communities. I would like to expand on the solutions. Food security is not only a matter of production, it's much more than that. It's about also, access, to markets. Yeah, it's about, income, it's about financial inclusion. I will give you an example of farmers in Mandera, for example, in Kenya. They produce watermelons. Now, a glass, a 200 ml glass of juice, watermelon juice, in high-end restaurants or cafeterias in Nairobi is around, $4. But a 5 kilogram watermelon in Mandera at the farm gate price is only 150 Kenya shillings, which is 1.5 US dollars. You can see the value chain, which means also farmers are not also benefiting from that value chain, largely because there are no road infrastructure. They are cut off from markets. So investment in infrastructure is critically important. And I'm just giving example, from Mandera, but also it's the same from the other parts of the Horn of Africa.
We are hearing on this panel that there is no shortage of solutions. There is no shortage of what to do to end this perennial cyclic crisis in the Horn of Africa and across the continent. Wanjiru, my point here is, if we know what to do, why are we not implementing what we know?
So we already have an initiative and it has 7 key points, and most of what you're saying is included in those key points. If we can address the issue of water, if we can address the issue of livestock and feed and fodder, if we can address the issue of environmental degradation, if we can address the issue of markets, I think the challenge we're having is political goodwill. Number one, political goodwill to make sure that the counties, that there's money allocated to implementation of these, ideas in a structured way. Number two, more stakeholder coordination. And I think this was also included in the strategy. I think in 2011, people worked, there was a kind of silo effect where civil society organizations, donors, and government were kind of working on their own. But I think towards 2017, there was a more of a coordinated response. And I think if we can move towards this coordination and harnessing the energies and the strengths, including of the communities, we can find, we can address this challenge. But for me, the key thing, we cannot go far unless we address the issue of environmental degradation. To me, that's a really important starting point. As we do these other things, issues of ensuring that we have more forest cover in each county to 10% and more per county, that will ensure that there's it's trapping the rainwater, withdrawing the rainwater, retaining the groundwater, and also ensuring communities have the fuel they need to cook and meet their other timber needs.
All right, I want to get your wrapping up comment here. And Yusuf, let me start off with you. Do you feel that with all the solutions that we have spoken about on this program, do you feel that the crisis can be reversed, hopefully permanently, in this region?
I believe so. As the saying goes, where there is a will, there is a way. And we have the science, we have the local indigenous knowledge, and these people have been really living in this environment for centuries, and have been having their coping mechanisms, and they also have their risk mitigation measures. Even in the pastoral communities, for example, they don't only raise or rear specific species, so they have a mix. For example, some camels, some cows, and some goats, and that's also a part of risk mitigation. Likewise, smallholder farmers have got this intercropping. So if one crop fails, then they have a fallback position. And I think the science and this indigenous knowledge can be combined, and I believe it can work for those communities. We have to really look at it holistically, particularly when it comes to market linkage, infrastructure development, so that we create that access and market linkage, and then create also financial inclusion for those communities. And I think together with this, combining all this, it is possible. It can be really reversed.
All right.
It can be reversed.
Wanjiru,
Yes.
your thoughts?
I agree, but I think we've got to be measured and realistic. The Green Wall in China, they started planting the trees in 1978, and the target is to finish the Green Wall to manage the Gobi Desert by 2050. The point I'm trying to say is that I think we can do it, but we need to be realistic and have long-term goals that are structured and measured after every so often. I think we can move it. The important thing is we can move drought from being a crisis to something we manage. And I think that's the most important thing. We are not going to do away with droughts. As we have challenges with climate change, we are going to have increased instances of natural disasters. I think they've moved from 100 per decade to 2,800 per decade by the 1990s. So natural disasters are going to happen. How we react to them, how we manage them is what makes us resilient. I think we have enough knowledge and enough information to manage it so that it's no longer a crisis, and that even when it happens, we don't lose any lives, or we lose minimal lives and minimal livestock, or none at all, because it's no longer a crisis. And for me, that would be a great achievement.
Dr. Ngumbi, you have the final word.
Well, I think everyone has said it. Mitigate resiliency within these communities, and are starting now implementing that from local up, top, bottom up, working together and building on taking a little bit from the science world, a little bit from the NGO, a little bit from the indigenous communities, and having a broad portfolio. I think here, just have one breed, the goat, the chicken, the cow, the beans, the maize, everything, but again, at the family level, ensuring that they have ability to have kitchen gardens. And I think about the children, the next generation. Why are we allowing the Northern Kenyan children to never have a generation that performs? Because we know also hunger has long-term consequences for brain development. So it's not only a crisis of food, it's a crisis of intellectualism, the next generation. Why are we allowing that? We can mitigate, of course, we have to build realism, but again, we should feel the urgency. Everyone, a citizen, we should not wait even for the leaders. Wanjiru talked about citizens that actually got fed up of this. We should all be fed up of it. And if we have that bottom up, if communities come together and march to their elected government and say, you need to, by next year, we need a dam, we need droughts. So empowering people so that they have the voice and the power, and that the solutions that come from NGOs, from the science, are implemented.
All right.
We will make and live with drought, and not, of course, ensuring that we also take care of the environment. Wanjiru stressed it.
Thank you all for a very insightful and lively discussion, but that's all we have time for this week. Thank you to my guests, Esther Ngumbi, Assistant Professor of Entomology at the University of Illinois, Yusuf Ahmed, a Regional Director for Islamic Relief, and Wanjiru Kamau, an Agricultural Policy Specialist based in Kenya. Do remember, we'd love to hear your feedback through our social media handles on Facebook and Twitter. And you can also catch the show on our YouTube playlist. Keep the conversation going and tune in again next week for more Talk Africa. From me, Beatrice Marshall, and the team in Nairobi, it's goodbye for now.